Hello and welcome to another episode of the Law of Relevancy podcast. We meet with marketing and communications industry professionals to talk about things that will enhance your careers and your lives. We guarantee that you will learn at least one thing during today's episode to make your life and your career more relevant. I'm Cord Zoen. I'm your host. I'm also the president of Bake More Pies, a full-service digital advertising and marketing agency based here in Tampa, Florida. Today we're joined by Travis Claytor. He is the president of TC Strategic Communications, which is a Chicago-based communications agency and a longtime friend of mine. Welcome, Travis.
Well, thanks for having me. Hopefully I can deliver something new today that people can learn.
I'm positive you will be able to. So Travis, tell us a little bit, before we get started, tell us a little bit about how you got into the communications industry.
Sure. Well, I am a University of Florida grad, so go Gators. I was fortunate enough to stumble upon public relations as a college student. I thought, heck, I can talk to people. Why not go into public relations? And what ended up happening is 15 years later, I've had an amazing run and worked with some awesome clients and some brands over the course of the years. I've had the opportunity to work with brands like Feld Entertainment and Disney on Ice and Gaylord Palms and SeaWorld and Busch Gardens. And I've even worked at the Convention and Visitors Bureau here in Hillsborough County doing corporate communications and public relations, working with events on behalf of the destination like the Republican National Convention and the NFL Super Bowl and NCAA Championship. So it's been quite the run, and I've been very lucky in my career.
Well, Travis, that is an impressive CV. I think that's huge, and I think a lot of people can learn something from some of your experiences. One of the things that I've always admired about you and some of the experiences that you've had is, for example, you've dealt with some pretty adverse situations, right? And as a communications professional, you don't really get the opportunity to say, I don't feel up to it today, right? I mean, sometimes it can be really challenging, right? Mm-hmm. So you had the unique pleasure of working through some of the Blackfish stuff when you were the director of communications at SeaWorld, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And sometimes the situations choose you. You don't get to choose the situation. So as communications professionals, what we have to do is be prepared to manage any situation, good or bad, and make sure that you bring it to a good conclusion, or at least as good as possible. And SeaWorld and working with that organization, it is an amazing organization. And when I was there, and I guess it still is a sort of a company in crisis going through the Blackfish issue, and it was challenging, and it's still a challenge for that brand, that organization today. For my part, I consider myself fortunate to have been able to work with an amazing team, not only at the corporate offices but across the country. And it was a real challenge to try and dispel misinformation and get accurate information and really take control of our narrative and tell the real story behind SeaWorld. And
well, let's talk about a little bit of those things, because I think you just brought up a couple really important points. So some of us, throughout our careers, depending on what part of the marketing spectrum we're working in, but a lot of times we can be faced with some pretty adverse situations, right? So you just described how you just touched on how you worked through some of that at SeaWorld, sure. Right? So tell us a little bit about what that was like. Did you know you were getting into this? Was this something that happened while you were there? Was this something that you walked into? And then what were those tactics that you guys did to help pull out of it? Because I think everybody can agree SeaWorld's in a much better place today than they were just a few years ago.
Yeah, no doubt. So Blackfish is a documentary about an incident that happened at SeaWorld Orlando back in 2010. And the documentary itself came out in 2013, and that's when things kind of started going sideways. And really what it turned into was a movement. So when I joined the SeaWorld corporate communications team was actually in 2014. So the Blackfish documentary was gaining steam, or it was rolling full steam. And I came in and I was responsible for helping to manage the reputation of the company. And so really what we had to do as a team, and I was part of a much bigger team, but we had to really take control of our narrative. We had to get our information and tell our story in our voice, and what had happened was the activists and the anti-zoo community had taken control of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so our job was to put compelling information out there, accurate, truthful information, and tell our story. And there was a lot that goes into it. We could spend days talking about it, but it really boils down to understanding who your audiences are.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to change activist minds. You got kind of have three groups.
So don't focus on trying to flip them.
No, you've got three groups. You have your advocates and those who are going to support you. You have your detractors and those who are never going to support you no matter what you do. They're just against that, whatever it may be. And then you have typically a really large group right in the middle. We'll call them fence sitters or throw a term in there as you like. But these are the group. This is a group of people that you have the opportunity to communicate with. They're willing to have a dialogue. They may not be sure. And so our job was to communicate with them and tell our story and give them information and let them make up their own mind based off of accurate information, not based off of maybe some misinformation.
So you're sort of arming them with some facts so that when they're having a conversation with somebody and it comes up.
Yeah, it's less about arming them because for our advocates, sure, we want to make sure that they have all the information so that they can go out and advocates are huge. This is something that a lot of that goes unnoticed sort of in a lot of communications campaigns, and that is you have to foster your advocates, right? So we'll get back to the fence sitters in a second, but you really have to foster your advocates. You have to give them the information that they need and empower them to go out and talk on your behalf. You can't do it as an organization, even as one as big as SeaWorld. You can't do it all on your own. There's just too much noise out there. There are too many people engaging. So you need advocates to help you tell your story and tell it the right way. So, you really need to foster those relationships. For the fence sitters and that group right in the middle, it's really just about having a dialogue with them. You shouldn't talk at them. You can't talk at people anymore. That type of communication doesn't work. They have to know that you're sincere, that you're authentic, that you're willing to have a conversation, and they probably have concerns, especially for SeaWorld. We had a lot of people in that middle group that had concerns, and okay, that's after hearing the misinformation that was out there, it's valid that you would have a concern. Our job was to respond to those concerns and give them the correct information and accurate information, truthful information, and then even in times invite them to come out and see it for themselves. That was one thing we found a lot. Once you came out and saw it for yourself, you had no question in your mind as to how the care that those animals receive. So it's less about arming them and much more about let's just have an open dialogue and communicate.
Okay, so when you're communicating with them, what kind of information are you putting out there? Are you telling them statistics? Are you filming evidence of saving, dolphins on the beach? Like, what is that? What does that look like?
It just depends on the audience. So as communications professionals, strategic communications professionals, it's our job to understand who we're talking to. Not all audiences are the same. Not everybody wants to hear the same thing. Millennials may want to hear something, or someone, and let's not even group them into millennials. You may have somebody in some part of the country who has specific interests. They want to hear or consume specific types of information just like other audiences do. So it's our job to understand who we're talking to and what their concerns are. In the case of SeaWorld, what their concerns are or were, and then have that discussion with them. So it may be a video that outlines some of the animal care that the killer whales were receiving or that other animals were receiving. It may be rescue information. It may be how we're going out and helping make the world a better and cleaner place. Or it may just be answering one question. It could be statistics about the number of animals rescued, or a fun infographic, or a short graphic or video. It just really depended. There were some basic concerns that most people had, and so we spent a lot of time discussing care of killer whales, or habitats, or diets, or you can go on and on about the. Well,
isn't the life expectancy of a killer whale longer in captivity?
Yeah. So, and I'm certainly not the scientist, so I it's not I can't speak to the specifics, but there are plenty of studies out there that show that animals in an accredited zoo or accredited facility.
I'm not advocating for taking the killer whales out of nature and putting them in zoos.
No, and it's not done anymore.
But that's an example, though, right? Because of the care, like they do have long.
They have excellent care in zoological facilities, and those facilities, accredited facilities like SeaWorld, they go through tons of effort and work
Sure.
to ensure that they are meeting and exceeding the standards of care. So in my job, part of my responsibility was to ensure that that type of information got out to the right audiences.
To the advocates, right? And then and then what do you do for the fence sitters?
It's again, you want to address the concerns. So you want to understand your audiences. Different audiences have different concerns. Some of them still believed that SeaWorld was going and catching killer whales out in the wild, and that didn't happen anymore. So sometimes it was easy as, okay, that's not accurate. Let me tell you why that's not accurate and give you the proof behind that. Others had concerns over maybe the care of the animals, and so at that point, maybe we do a Facebook Live with veterinarians or animal care specialists, so they could show them the care that the animals.
I mean, that's
receiving.
Extremely authentic information that you're sharing with them, right?
And
but you can't stage that. I mean, it's real.
No,
and right?
It's they say never in PR or in film video never work with kids or animals, right? And that's what we did all the time, and so no, you have to be authentic, and people recognize when you're not being honest, and that was something that we recognized, and even as you really have to. As a PR person or as a communicator, you have to put yourself in the position of the audience that you're talking to. And a great example is that we found out that the way we were shooting videos wasn't the way that was resonating, right? So we were shooting videos from a specific angle, kind of shooting down on habitats and on animals, and it was just inherently this kind of funky angle, and it didn't put you in their world. And so we started doing some underwater footage and getting down at their level and helping people understand that there really was a relationship there, and showing what it's like to be on that level. And that resonated so much more with people.
So those details are really, really important. I mean, even a camera angle can communicate some sort of a subliminal thing. Like I know, for example, if you're filming from a point of view of a child, like that camera's got to go up. If you watch a lot of horror films, like it's actually the camera's actually pointing down, right? Because it's a little so when you're getting at the eye level or down in their environment and things like that, that makes perfect sense. Now, you've told me you were actually present during a pretty special moment, right? With a birth of a dolphin, is that correct?
It was the birth of the last killer whale born at SeaWorld out in San Antonio. So that was a very special. I feel honored to have been able to been there for something like that.
Right. All right. So you're a communications professional, right? We're not just reacting to these things. Like they're famous. Communications professionals are famous for having crisis plans and
we plan for days. This
right,
is what
exactly.
we do. We plan.
So give us some idea. So you're talking about, okay, you got to know your audience. So how do you segment? How do you know your audience? Like, what does that planning process look like?
Sure. A lot of it has to do with the specific business you're in, and different clients, that I would work with on the agency side or different in-house PR people. You usually have a pretty good sense based off of the research that you're doing for theme parks, who's coming into your park, or for other businesses, who's buying your product, or even if you want to attract a new audience. A lot of the time, PR inherently is sort of a growth, other than crisis communications, is very much of a growth activity. So you're oftentimes going after new audiences, and so you typically have, or at least hopefully you have some data or some research that backs up who you're going after and why. And a lot of the time it's understanding that kind of plays into your brand voice and who you're trying to be as an organization. So as strategic communications professionals, it's our job to help bring that brand voice to life through the content that we're creating, and specifically content that we're creating for an audience, right? So it's really just, what are you trying to do as an organization? PR is not a solo thing. It does and should play into the bigger goals and initiatives that an organization has, so that the organization can continue to grow. So our job is to help the company identify who can be the biggest growth factor in terms of audiences. In a crisis communication standpoint, it gets very, very much more focused depending on the crisis, right? So if it's a localized crisis, which anymore with digital media, anything can be a national or national crisis.
I was just going to ask you about that, because PR isn't just about traditional media any longer, right?
No, in fact, and traditional media still plays an important part, but even traditional media is involved in digital media now. So when a news station comes out, if they send a reporter out to cover a story, that reporter's tweeting when they're out there. They're posting on Instagram while they're out there. Their story is going to be online afterward. So you really have to think through, how do we convey our messages through not only news stations, but through other channels as well, whether those be earned channels or shared channels or even paid. Paid, a lot of people don't realize paid plays a big part in a crisis scenario, or at least it can. And if you're really working to own that narrative, you have to take everything into consideration, not just earned media. And you can bucket it into 4 different types. There's paid media, there's earned media, there's shared media, and there's owned media. Right. And so paid, we talked about. Earned media is the PR, the media relations that we go through. Shared is your social channels. What are you conveying through your social channels? When are you conveying it? And how often are you conveying it? And to who? Right. Because different social channels give you different audiences, even different audiences within the same social channel. So you really have to be aware of that. And then there's the owned channels, which are your website, anything that you specifically can control the message
like
of.
Where you're like technically the publisher of the
You
content.
are, right. You can control the feel, the look, the experience of owned channels. And those are very important as well, because that's the basis of where you can house information that you're then going to communicate to the world. And so as a strategic communications professional, whether you are on the crisis communications side or doing just straight PR for a fun event, you really need to take the whole picture into account when you're creating an integrated campaign, because otherwise you're leaving things to chance, and that's just not how we should do it.
Right. Well, let's talk about how we should do it, right?
Yeah.
So my experience is that it's always been very difficult for me to talk about the organizations that I'm a part of, being in the organization. So a lot of times I've found it helpful to work with an outside resource, a communications professional like yourself, to help me understand from an outside point of view how we're being perceived.
Yeah, oftentimes, and it happens to everybody. You get lost in the mix and being so close to something. And it happens as PR pros. It happens to professionals all over any industry, right? You get close to something, so you kind of lose perspective.
Well, you're busy doing the work.
You are,
yeah.
And so oftentimes it's helpful to have somebody come in and back out a little bit and help you see things from a different perspective. And really, again, it all boils down to understanding, one, what your values are, what you stand for as a company, who you want to be and what you want to convey, and then how do other people see you. It doesn't matter how you see yourself. Okay. It matters how others see you, because you want to convey a specific story to them. So what PR pros can do is help you back off a little bit and say, okay, let's take a look at our audiences. Let's understand what their motivations are, what drives them, and then how would they perceive a specific message or a specific piece of content, and then let's adapt it so it resonates with them in such a way where it gets them to closer to whatever your goal may be. If it's visiting a website, we give them something that gets them energized to click onto something else, or if it's to buy something or make a trip or come into a park, then that, those are different goals, and you should be creating content around those goals to get those audiences to take action.
So kind of work backwards to create that content.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's you can't create content and this is the old school method, right? You create a piece of content and you blast it out to everybody.
Yeah.
That doesn't work anymore. So you really have to work backwards and understand, what does that audience want to consume? Because if you're creating something that they don't want to engage with, they don't want it, then they're not going to engage with it. And you basically just created a piece of content that's not
right. And when
we
had Ben Tamblin on, he was saying that his number one metric in understanding his effectiveness is engagement.
Yeah, well, you got to get people to engage. That's taking action, right? That's the initial action. Let me engage in a piece of content. Then once you get them to do that, then how do you, and this is where the strategic part comes in, how do you get them to take the next step and the next step and the next step? And of course you try and condense the steps, because then you make your life easier, and less steps to do means more conversion, more action. But engagement is, I can see why you'd say that, because that's the first step of the process.
So let's talk about, we've talked about a situation where you've earned some of your stripes, right? With dealing with that kind of an adverse situation, right? And now let's talk about a situation where when you were going into it, it was sort of fresh, right? And you also earned some stripes, right? Let's talk about the Warrior Games that were just held here in Tampa.
Yeah, that I was honored to be able to oversee the strategic communications for the 2019 Department of Defense Warrior Games held in Tampa this year, and it was a great experience. The men and women, the wounded warriors who were participating, were nothing short of inspirational. And you left every day, no matter how much you worked or how crazy it was, you left just feeling inspired and like you could do anything in the world. If they can do it, then you absolutely could do it. So I was blessed to be a part of it, but it was a challenge, to say the least. And Tampa had never hosted this kind of event
Mm-hmm.
before, and you're working off a military base which has restricted access to it, and you're working with wounded warriors and military members who may not always be comfortable in front of the camera, and then of course there are limitations with the information that you can put out there. So as a PR guy, it was very challenging to come into that kind of scenario and create a communications plan that achieved our goals, but still followed all the rules, if you will. It is the military after all, so within a lot of rules.
Well, so let's talk about those goals that were achieved. So you were able to go into that scenario working with what you were working with, right? And putting together your plan, executing your plan, had teammates to help you with executing on that plan. How did it end up doing? Like, how was it attended?
It was the most well-attended Warrior Games in Warrior Games history. So we broke records for the amount of people coming out. It was 10 days of amazing action-packed competition with the Wounded Warriors. Media attention was through the roof. We had media out there for the entire event, plus a couple of days on either end. And what I think the biggest thing that I'm most proud of is, in part because of the communications and the marketing that we did as a team, the community truly embraced this event. And you saw that through the reporting. You saw that through the volunteer efforts. We were able to spread the word about the needs of the event, again, even from a volunteering standpoint. And we were able to get community partners engaged and get the media engaged. And because of all of that, there was so much support for accomplishing all of this and bringing in sponsors and having people come in and help us underwrite specific activities so we could put on the best possible event for those Wounded Warriors.
So that's an example of where, when you have a complete PR and communications plan, you execute on that plan, you can see some real results.
Without a doubt. And it was integrated. So we, on the communication side, we had our plan there. On the marketing side, we had a plan, and we worked as a very cohesive team to execute on all of these levels. So on those 4 buckets I was telling you about earlier, we were able to integrate all 4 of those buckets in a very effective way to drive attendance, to drive awareness, and to drive support.
So we're learning a little bit about what strategic communications are today. We're going through this process right now where we're doing 2020 plans for our clients. And sometimes we're working with new clients or working with old clients. It seems to me like you would recommend, and I know you're biased being a communications professional, but it seems to me like we should always include that element in the planning process from a strategic communications. And then downstream of that is, okay, what coverage are we looking for? What kind of impression are we trying to make, and things like that, right?
Sure. Well, if you're creating a strategic plan, right, whether that be marketing or communications, you need a plan. And a lot of, whether you have if you have an in-house PR team, you still need a plan. If you don't have an in-house PR team, you still need a plan.
Right.
And you can go out there and execute, but if you execute without a plan, you're kind of driving blind. You don't know what you're trying to achieve or how you're going to achieve it or how you're going to measure. So for anybody, if you're going through your 2020 plans and you're kind of going through this process, include communications, right? Whether you're bringing in somebody from the outside, because if you don't, again, you're just missing one whole bucket and one whole element of a strategic effort. And so, include it in the marketing plans, include it in your planning, your business planning, and really, as you get, like you said, you get downstream, it all has to drive back to what are the business goals. And that's how we bring value as strategic communicators or marketing professionals. It's how do we drive value for the organization? Maybe that's conversions. Maybe we help you drive through these efforts, drive sales or conversions if you have a product to sell, or maybe it's getting people to visit. If you're looking for awareness, we can measure that as well. So it really just depends on what you're trying to accomplish as an organization, what those business goals are, and then you build out your plan from there.
Okay, so those are some KPIs that we could use to learn whether or not the communications plan is effective. I guess you could measure on those particular channels. So if it's news, that traffic to your website is going to show up as direct and organic visits, branded search terms, things like that. That's where someone is literally searching for the name of your company because they may have seen a story with the name of your company in it. For those marketing professionals watching this, for those owners of businesses that are watching this that don't have a full-time or contract communications professional, are there some resources that those folks, are there any good books and resources that could help get them started if they don't feel like they're ready yet to hire like an outside communications resource?
Sure. There are a lot of resources out there. I'm partial to the Spin Sucks team. They do a great job at kind of explaining things in a very simplistic way and helping people understand the integrated communications
So
process.
is that a website? Is that a podcast? Like
Both.
where will we find
Both.
that?
Spinsucks.com.
Okay.
So,
right.
and Jenny Dietrich is amazing. She's the owner, the founder of Spin Sucks, and it's a book as well. So it's check them all out. But really, what it boils down to is talk to a professional. Don't you can go out there and you can try and do social media, but the danger, or you can try and do media relations. The danger in that is it can, if you do it the wrong way, it can have sort of the adverse impact. So you might end up causing more harm than good. So it's, talk to a professional. There are plenty of agencies out there. Come talk to Bake More Pies. Come talk to TC Stratcom. Right? We're always happy to talk to somebody to help them understand where we might be able to help them or give them some additional resources. It's always worth a conversation. And I can promise you, no matter who you are, no matter what organization or industry you're in, you could benefit from strategic marketing, strategic communications efforts and services. And it really boils down to reaching more audiences for a specific goal. And this is what we do. We communicate and we give people content to engage with and consume and really just start a dialogue with specific audiences.
Sure. Okay. So that's all fantastic advice. You've been a strategic communicator since 2004? 2004. So the internet was roughly 9-10 years old at that time. We all know it's a huge part of our lives. Where do you see the future of communications going?
It's tough to look into the crystal ball, right? Yeah. But it's like every other industry, we're still trying to grapple with how is technology going to impact our industry? And it's already impacting our industry. On the journalistic side, you have computer programs writing news stories, and which happens, right? Now you think about it, it's very doable and plain language, and that's happening. So it changes the way we communicate to journalists quite frequently. On our side, from a social media standpoint, an AI standpoint, it changes how we can communicate to our audiences. So from a public relations perspective, some people are scared that public relations are going to be phased out. I don't see it that way. I see it as these are additional tools that allow us to communicate in a much more effective and efficient manner with our audiences. And no matter how they evolve or how the technology evolves or what new technologies come out, we need to evolve as an industry and as professionals so that we can continue to drive better results for our clients or for the organizations that we belong to. There's a great opportunity coming up for our industry over the next 5 to 10 years, certainly 5 years, that is going to allow us to be at the table, to have these conversations with leadership, and to be able to show them that the PR efforts and the strategic communications efforts that we can bring forth truly do drive business results and they drive value for the organization. So we'll see how it evolves. We'll see what technology comes out, but I would encourage everybody who's in the PR industry or in the marketing industry to view this in a very positive light and be the leaders that we should be to engage and utilize these tools to show value to the organizations that we represent.
Yeah, absolutely. I would second that. It seems like in today's media, the audiences, how they're consuming the information is very fragmented. Mm-hmm. And as it gets more fragmented, showing up on advanced TV, over-the-top TVs, that's where you would watch a normal TV on like a tablet or something like that, through social channels, things like that. It seems like the plan is even more important today than it's ever been.
You just have to know you're absolutely, I completely agree with you. You have to have a plan. You have to know what your channels are, what audiences are engaging on those channels. And the great news is look, if there's a channel out there, there's a resource to tell you who's engaging on that channel.
Sure.
All right. So we just need to take those audiences into consideration and understand for that specific channel, for that specific audience, what do we need to communicate and how do we need to communicate it so it resonates?
Right. So it's in ultimately we're always going to go back to that fundamental law that says that when other people, whether it's a journalist or someone with a lot of followers on social media or just friends and family, when someone else is talking about an entity or an individual or business, it's in some ways more credible than the business or the person talking about themselves. It's always going to be that way, right? So how do you maximize that opportunity and you work with a professional?
Yeah, the third-party endorsements are crucial, and you can tout yourself all day long, but there's an inherent bias there, and people recognize that. I mean, anybody who's gotten a commercial or seen a commercial, been served up a commercial, of course, we're going to say great things about the brand, about the organization. It's a commercial, right? And what are you going to say bad things about your organization? Let's hope not. So having third-party endorsements, but authentic, credible third-party endorsements, unless you're talking to a Kardashian, right? They can put anything up. But having a credible third-party endorsement is vital. It lends credibility to your brand. It gets new audiences engaged. And so it should be a part of your plan. Sometimes influencers, and many times they're paid. So that's kind of a pay-to-play kind of thing. But that often is a way to kind of get your brand out there a little bit more. But I'll take it back to it all has to be integrated.
Sure.
And I'll credit Jenny and the Spin Sucks team with the peso model, that paid, the earned, the shared, and the owned. Everything has to be integrated. Otherwise, it's just not as effective as it could be.
Well, those are some great final thoughts. Thank you for joining us today on the Law of Relevancy podcast. We know that you probably learned something today. In fact, we guaranteed it. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to follow us on our social channels. This will be published on the Bake More Pies social channels, and you can follow us there, like us, and share it with your friends. Thank you again.